Welcome to Gender Benderz. I'm your host, Jajay Daniels. One night, while I was waiting for one of New York's finest trains to arrive, this guy who looked like your typical alpha male stepped onto the platform. He had on his workout gear with a duffel bag slung across his body, which accentuated his chiseled chest. Of course, women were gawking at him and making eyes until he pulled his hands out of his pocket, brandishing color-coded nails. That's when laughter erupted and silent admiration turned to loud whispers of, how could he be wearing polish? I couldn't help but wonder why a man wearing polish is such a big deal. Small instances like these are glaring evidence that we live in a gender dictatorship that tells us how to dress, behave, and express. Well, here on Gender Benderz, we are opening up a dialogue for people like me, who are bending the rules. I struggle almost daily with my identity, and I'm sure there are others out there who are in the struggle. It is my hope that this show will give us, Gender Benderz, the room to explore, question, and affirm our identity. And here with me to achieve this is Tantay, LGBTQI Health Equity Specialist on the New York City Health Department's of Center for Health Equity. We also have 17-year-old Maxx, who is the youth leader for Staten Island branch of the New York City Health Department's Teens Connection. Before we begin, I must ask, do either of you have any preferred pronouns?
I use they, them, theirs pronouns.
I also use they, them, theirs.
Preferred pronouns are ways in which people would like to be referred. Just like some people go by he and she, others go by they, and etc. It's always important to call people by the way they identify. Now, if what we just said made that emoji with the question mark in a box pop into your mind, I have a short clip of identity terms that you'll probably hear us use in this discussion. I want to make sure nothing gets lost in translation. So let's take a look. I hope you all found that helpful. And if you're now joining us, this is Gender Benderz, and we just showed a clip of some sex and gender terms. I chose that clip for a number of reasons. First, it defines the distinction between gender and sex, which people often think are one and the same. So Larry, can you expound on the difference between gender and sexuality?
Yeah, so sex is generally what we consider what we're born as or what we biologically have, and it's assigned by a doctor. So when a child is born, a doctor will look between their legs and then assign them a category, and usually it's either male or female, right? But that's what we consider sex to be. Gender is really how we feel about who we are. So it's just our internal perception of who we think we are in this larger social construction of male, female, and other things, right? And those things don't necessarily match up.
Another thing the clip pointed out was gender identity, and that while most people identify themselves as man or women, for some, it doesn't fit neatly into those two choices. We saw that in the year 2015, which is said marked the awakening of gender fluidity and transgenderism. In that year, we saw Caitlyn Jenner scantily clad on the cover of Vanity Fair, while Vogue magazine unveiled the first transgender model. We heard former Disney star Miley Cyrus drop the gender nonconformance bomb, and we relished the roles of Laverne Cox and Ruby Rose on Orange is the New Black. And we can't forget YouTube superstar Jazz Jennings, who was the first transgender girl to appear in a skincare commercial and land her own reality TV show on TLC. These celebrities made the topic of gender identity a mainstream talking point. So, Larry and Max, so how does the presence of trans celebrities speak out significance to you?
I feel that representation is important for any marginalized community. There's always been straight people, and that was considered the norm for years and centuries. But when you have representation for LGBT people and for other cases, for people of color, for disabled people, it makes people who aren't so out there in the world, who aren't famous, but just everyday people, feel a sense of empowerment, feel like they belong in this world because they're seeing someone like them being represented on the screen or in the news.
Larry?
Yeah. I think people like Janet Mock and Laverne Cox are amazing. I think that it's great that these powerful women of color are really out there in the public and that people can recognize them and see representation of trans women of color. I think that somebody like, say, Caitlyn Jenner doesn't understand her role in the community, and I think that that can be a little problematic. So I think it's really important to really scrutinize and put our leaders and our celebrities to task and let them know that they do, even if they're regular people, they also are this public face for our community.
So I would like to ask both of you, Larry and Max. First, Larry, how do you identify?
I identify now as non-binary and kind of as demigender.
Okay, Max.
I identify as gender fluid.
Okay. So I would like to ask you, Max, there's always a timeline between what you feel and what you express. So when did you start unidentifying with the gender you were assigned?
So I've always been a very nerdy person into the pop culture, comic books. So I got into cosplay and dressing up as characters when I was younger. And I found myself dressing up as a lot of male characters and identifying more with them when I saw them. So once I got a little bit older, I was online, maybe when I was like 11 or 12, and I saw someone say, in a hashtag gender fluid, and I looked up what it was, and I was like, wow, I really identify that way. It wasn't until I really became a freshman, maybe even sophomore year of high school, that I began wearing more masculine clothing if I felt like that day, button-downs and all of that.
And when did you start expressing your gender?
I think I accidentally asked that too early. Yeah, more recently I've started expressing my gender, and most recently I've started using a chest binder on certain days. That's like the newest addition to my gender fluid wardrobe.
So how did your friends and family react when you started expressing yourself?
My friends have always been really supportive of me and whatever I do, and I try to do the same for them. So I heard, no backlash from them. My family, I have a liberal side and a more conservative side of my family. My conservative side of my family was kind of apprehensive, especially when I used to have very long hair, and I cut it short, and I dyed it blue, and I started dressing like a guy. So they were very apprehensive, and I still get, those dirty looks at Thanksgiving. But I know that they still love me as their family member.
Great. And what has been the response from students and teachers?
I think my school has a very LGBT-friendly climate. Every teacher that I've had has had no problem using my preferred name, and no one has ever commented on the way that I dress or act.
Very lucky. It's very important to have supportive.
Very fortunate.
So how do you handle this? According to recent UC Berkeley study, transgender and gender fluid teens face up to 3 times more mental and physical abuse at school and at home than their gender conforming peers. Can either of you attest to this? Let's start with you, Larry.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that is just one of many studies that have given us this statistic. And I've worked with LGBTQ youth, and especially transgender and gender nonconforming youth, for the past 12 years, and I've seen the same thing. The more that somebody doesn't conform with society's standards, the more they're ridiculed. And that's why we really need policies in place, why we need teachers and administration who are trained, and why we need these agencies who are here to support our young people, putting out programs that will better support them.
I've been fortunate, but I feel like, especially around an older generation of people, younger teens and young adults have to face their parents and family who weren't around a world where this was so publicized, where it was okay to be transgender or gender nonconforming. So it's very hard to change their perception, and that's perhaps what sparks the disconnect between those two parties. And it's very hard when, just trying to think from their perspective, a parent is hearing this shocking thing in their eyes from their child. They don't know how to react, they don't know what to do, and sometimes it may be an anger response or something else unpleasant.
So do you both think that it's just a generational gap, that there is transphobia? What do you think is the root of transphobia?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a generation gap, because unfortunately we see this happening in our schools, with people's peers. I think that the media plays into it. I remember I would do trainings in high schools and middle schools in different parts of New York State. And the general response I would get, like say, when we were talking about the need for transgender people to be able to use the bathrooms that work for them, they would say that it was unnatural, that people are born however they're born, and that's how it is. And I think that the media doesn't do enough to really push that idea out of people's heads. And I think that we also need more programs that support families and learning different values, understanding gender from a more expansive way than we see it now.
I think that part of it does lie in the educational system. People are naturally resistant to change. If you were to move houses, you're sentimental, you don't want to move. And it's almost the same type of concept when you're taught as a young child, you can either be this or that, and you have this or that genitalia, and that is your spot, and that's your role in this life. When change comes up, transgender students want to use the bathroom that they identify with. That's not something that even peers may be used to, and they're resistant to that change.
Now, although we live in New York City and we're very privileged to be protected by city law, that we could use the bathroom in which we identify or however we would like, but the law is not always enforced. Have you ever had an experience where you were discriminated against, or you felt uncomfortable in using a certain type of bathroom that wasn't traditionally assigned to you?
I definitely feel uncomfortable. I would definitely prefer using a gender-neutral bathroom if there's an option. If there isn't, I would prefer to use the male bathroom. I never have actually done that because I've always felt uncomfortable because I still present in a way that many people perceive to be feminine, and I'm afraid of being surrounded by adult cis men and getting those looks and ridiculed. It's not worth the effort for me. So I usually just unfortunately conform to my birth gender's bathroom.
Yeah, I have the same experience. It's easier, unfortunately, to go kind of with your expression rather than your identity when it comes to finding spaces. I know with the youth that I've worked with, we've had quite a few youth who were harassed in bathrooms. They would tell me stories about traveling with their parents cross country, and they just wouldn't stop to use the bathroom until they got to a hotel. Youth that I've worked with have said that they don't use the bathroom at all during the school day if they can help it, or they find ways of cutting gym class. If they do change in the locker room, then people complain, and if they're switched to another locker room, people complain there. So there isn't really a great option for youth, even though we do have that great legislation, those great guidelines from the Department of Ed. We need more people who are really actively pushing administration to enforce it.
So do you think the solution to the whole bathroom debate is to ideally have more gender neutral bathrooms, or is it just important to just have people to be able to use the bathroom that they choose?
I think both things are important because there are people that may be agender or just somewhere where they don't feel comfortable using either a male or female bathroom that might want that gender neutral bathroom. But if we're looking at people who are trans, a trans guy or a trans woman who want to use the bathroom of their choice, I think the education is there and the acceptance is important for them as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we need as many options as possible for people. We do need to also shift our culture, especially in our schools, so that they know that people can use whatever bathroom fits them.
So what would you say to a conservative or someone who's closed-minded who might tell you, oh, you're in the wrong bathroom, you know, no men is allowed here, you know, what the same rhetoric that people say that like you're going to prey on them, you're going to stalk them. So, yeah.
I mean, I'd even go out on a limb to call it hypocrisy sometimes, the way that people have unfortunately treated gender fluid people and people who are gender non-conforming in the restroom of their choosing. I'm personally not a very confrontational person. I'd probably just back off and leave, but to anyone in that situation willing to stand up for themselves, I'd say, you know, keep it calm, stand your ground, just say I'm in here because I'm comfortable using this restroom, and if you have a problem with that, I'm sorry. But I think starting a fight is never really a good idea because it'll only it'll make the news and more people will say, oh, those trans people, those gender non-conforming people, and our rep will get worse.
In situations with friends who have been harassed like that, I've talked to them about that, and something that's really useful is knowing your rights and knowing that in New York City, you can use public accommodations that fit who you are, right? And public accommodations are restrooms and changing facilities and other things that are open to the public. So you should be able to use whichever one fits who you are. But I totally agree that safety is like your main concern. If you feel unsafe, if you feel uncomfortable, then that might be something that you have to compromise in that situation, which is unfortunate. When I have put out there to people my rights, say in like changing rooms, in department stores, people have actually backed down. So that's worked for me, but I know that I have certain privileges too with age and with the way I present that might make it a little easier for me.
Yeah, I mean, I could share from personal experience. I feel like when I'm using the school bathroom, let's say the women's bathroom, because there's not a gender neutral bathroom around, I will always have an anxiety of like, what are people going to say? People are going to look at me. Sometimes I just rush to the stall and I kind of like hide there and feel uncomfortable and then feel scared people are going to look at me. And I never have that space to really just feel comfortable. And even though I know about my rights and my laws, and it's great that like even in the workplace, you know, your employer has to call you by your preferred pronouns. Or if someone tells you you're in the wrong bathroom, you know, you could file a complaint or file even a lawsuit. But we know that still with all these laws out there that it's not completely enforced and not completely protect us. I'll share you something that's a little bit traumatic. I went the other month to a entertainment venue, and it was a queer trans party that like rented the space, but there were other people also in the same like entertainment venue, and they didn't have a gender neutral bathroom. So I went to the women's bathroom. I was dressing more masculine, I guess, but I went with my two female friends, as always, because I felt like I would be more protected. And there was a worker there that she immediately told me men should go to the other side, you know? And I told her, and she kept shouting over me, and I told her I shouldn't have to, but I told her, like, I don't identify as male, and she didn't care what I said. And then I told her politely, as she was still shouting at me, I said, you know, under New York City law, I use the bathroom my choice. And it got to the point that my friend tried to, you know, distract her to allow me to use the stall. So I tried to go to the stall, and as I went to the stall, the worker slammed open the stall. She put her hands on my neck and my body. I had my pants unzipped, and I wasn't even able to pee, and she was calling security. Now I was scared, and I knew that when the security came, they would probably take her voice over me. And the whole time, there were other women in the stall that just looked and laughed. They didn't even go to the bathroom. And my friend luckily was able to get me out, but I was so frozen and so shocked, I wasn't able to defend myself. I wasn't able to say anything. And that happened to me many times in a matter of couple of months, you know, whether it's outside being physically attacked or going to bathrooms, and really traumatized and really made me feel scared to express myself and be myself. That we live in a world that really says, if you don't fit these two boxes, there is no room for you. Now, as much as I filed a complaint, you know, with like some legal organizations, it takes forever to get justice. And it's definitely a problem. And that's why we need to talk more about gender and trans issues and let people know about making sure people feel safe. So in lines with that, I would like to ask you, there's many misconceptions people say about gender nonconforming people. Some misconceptions, shall I say, common things people say is like, let's start with, if someone says to you, you're just confused.
I mean,
how would you reply?
Heard it out of my own mother's mouth. That's something that I feel comes from someone's lack of understanding and lack of acceptance. I believe, feel a little bit offended because I've done my research and I feel that I'm lucky enough to know who I am and where I stand within my identity. So I would stand my ground in that kind of situation and say, I'm not confused, I'm gender fluid, and that's my choice, that's my identity, and there's nothing to be confused about. You know?
That's valid. Yeah. And Larry, if someone told you it's just an excuse to play dress up, the way you express yourself.
It's just an excuse to play dress up. I don't know. I love dressing up.
Me too.
Right? That's such a strange one.
Yeah. So what about this?
Yeah.
If gender is a social construct, then transgender doesn't really exist.
If gender is a social construct, then transgender doesn't really exist?
Yeah.
What about all the genders?
Right.
I mean, right? Yeah. I honestly feel, you know, I've gone through all these different ideas about what I am and who I am, and I am pretty sick of gender. I just wish that we could just get rid of gender, honestly,
Amen.
right?
Amen.
This whole system, you know, it really is built so that some people can have more than other people.
Right.
You know, it degrades women, it traumatizes and kills trans folk. You know, the system of gender is just not working the way it should work or could work for people. So yeah, if you're invalidating my gender, then you're invalidating your own gender.
And people pretend like transgender, gender nonconforming is like a new thing.
Yeah.
We've been here forever, all across the world. There are certain cultures that embrace, you know, the third gender or different types of gender. And patriarchy in Western society really has just screwed it up for all of us.
Definitely.
So back to you, Max. Your pronoun preferences doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Like they, them is not proper English.
So from a grammatical standpoint, I suppose that it wouldn't be knowing a person a lot about grammar, but the world is changing and the language is changing. You know, the word Google is in the Oxford Dictionary. That wasn't there 10 years ago.
Right.
Actually, I don't even know if we had Google 10 years ago. Maybe we did. So there's a number of articles that you could show that person. You know, esteemed colleges, I know the one I've used in this situation is Princeton's article about they, them as a gender neutral pronoun and how it's okay to use those pronouns, it's acceptable, and how they would be used. It's always better to educate than to get frustrated with a person, in my opinion.
I actually learned that they, them is a proper form of like English grammar because you use anyways if someone's at a store, you're like, oh, they are over there.
Yeah.
You know, I guess maybe because people, like you said, are not used to in person.
People consider it like a plural, especially if you look at it in other languages, they'll have separate, like I know in Spanish as ellos and ellas as like them male and them female, and so they're not used to having something singular and ungendered like that.
Sorry. So Larry, you should only use the bathroom that corresponds to your private parts. The first thing I would say is like, how does this question relate to someone who's intersex, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And then what, are you going to just check everyone's genitalia? Like if you're going to go around, if you're going to ask what I have between my legs, then, you know, you better show what you have between your legs. I mean, I don't think anyone should have to prove their gender, prove their right to use the bathroom that conforms with who they are, you know. And that's why I also feel like we need gender-neutral restrooms, because that language is also it's a little problematic. Being able saying that corresponds with, you know, your gender identity, because I'm non-binary, so unless there's a gender-neutral restroom, it's going to.
Where do I go?
Yeah, exactly.
Maxx, all gender non-conforming people are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or queer.
Now, that's just the person making an assumption, and even if it is true for the person, you know, it may not be, and it isn't for all people. There are trans women who identify as straight, so on and so forth. That happened to be the first one to pop into my head. And, you know, that's like saying all cis people are straight. That's not true either. Like Larry was saying before, it's kind of a paradox. If you're invalidating me, you're invalidating you too. Where is the line?
You know, it took me a long time to really break away from this idea that like gender expression and sexuality and gender have nothing to do with each other. You know, growing up, people always said, oh yeah, Gégé is gay, you know, because Gégé acts feminine, Gégé acts this way. And I thought like, oh, it must be true because I feel attracted to this gender and I do express this way. And I really, really did internalize. And then as I got older and older, I met people who are straight, cisgender, white males, for example, who like to cross-dress, you know, and met all types of people, met gay men who are very masculine and gay women who are feminine or not, you know, and it just, I had to do some research about like where is this connection where we put gender expression labels on people's sexualities and gender, and you probably already know that a way to try to stigmatize someone who's male is by saying that they are feminine, and that feminine is inherently weak, or something is apparently wrong with a woman if she's more masculine, and the same thing with people in between. So I would like people to know that a lot of transphobia and a lot of homophobia is inherently misogynistic, you know, and that a lot of the culture and a lot of language of labeling and branding people has really been used to put down gay people, but has really been used to put down women. So people should be more conscious about that. Now, to either of you, do you believe our society is becoming more accepting or tolerant of trans and gender nonconforming folks?
I do think to a certain extent that we are, just with the appearance of gender-neutral restrooms and those types of options for people. The fact that we're seeing trans models, gender nonconforming models and performers, and that we're seeing people who are perceived as male in makeup campaigns now. I feel like all of that is important to kind of attempt to demolish the gender boxes that we've created, and we're taking steps, although they may be tiny, we're taking them.
It's taking forever.
You know, forever is better than not at all.
Right, that's true.
That's true, little by little.
I'm gonna come to your church now. I need that preaching.
You gotta come to the Jew church.
Yeah. I agree that, you know, little by little, we are becoming a more accepting society for transgender, gender non-conforming people and non-binary folk. But I am concerned given the legislation and policies that have been taken away or that are being proposed now against transgender people. So I think that we got to a really great place of acceptance, or at least we're getting close to that. And now we're kind of, you know, on the razor's edge where I feel like all these things can be taken away. All the work that we've been doing for so long could be taken away. So it really is vitally important right now for us to keep fighting, you know, for our rights.
What advice do you have for others who are not comfortable with expressing their gender identity?
I think I would want those individuals to know that your gender expression doesn't change your gender identity. If you can't present the way that you want to present, that doesn't make you any less of who you are. And your safety is more important in that situation than anything. So you may not be the happiest, but it will pay off to be safe in your situation.
Larry?
I totally agree. The only thing I would add to that is that legally in your schools, you should be able to do that, and that your gender expression and your gender identity in school can be different than what you express at home, you know, and your school legally has to protect your confidentiality and privacy. So if you think that you can find safety in your school to be able to express yourself how you want to or to try that, then you know the government is on your side in that sense. At least New York City government is on your side. And there are allies in the school system also throughout the Department of Ed. There are teachers, and it might be useful to find those people first and let them know what you've been thinking of.
So what do you think outside of LGBT spaces, ways that we could create safe spaces in schools for people who are gender variant or transgender? You know, maybe ideally we'll have like a mandatory makeup sessions for anyone who's trans feminine, or
Sure.
like, you know, a prom where you could pick and choose what you want to wear. How have you created safe spaces? What do you think ideally works as safe spaces?
I think through most schools, as far as I know, aren't allowed to deny the creation of an LGBT organization within their school. So my school's Gay Straight Alliance was only created a few years before I got there, because there was one, and a trans student who I knew who now graduated was seeking a place, a safe space for himself, and created it. So throughout the work of those kind of organizations or just LGBT individuals in the school, you can create these kind of spaces and events if the school is compliant, if you're fortunate enough for that. So I think that would definitely be ideal. With the whole prom thing, I mean, it's been an issue for God knows how long, people wearing what they want to prom. I think it'll unfortunately continue being an issue for a while, because I've seen people who are designated female at birth wear a suit to prom, but if someone who's designated male at birth wanted to wear a dress, I know that that would still be an issue in my school, which I feel is fairly liberal, so that's something that definitely should be worked on.
In regards to making schools safer places, the Department of Ed created this program for teachers called Out for Safe Schools, and basically they go through a training on inclusion for LGBTQ people, and then they're given these badges that say Out for Safe Schools, and it has different resources that they can use or that they can give to one of their students if they need support. So that's one thing that the city's doing to make our schools safer, along with making sure that we have really great policies that put the rights in our transgender and gender non-conforming students' hands, letting them know that they have every right to express themselves as whatever they want to in the school, you know, and that those are supposed to be safe spaces for them. And the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, what we're trying to do is make our community safer. We're working with faith-based communities to encourage family acceptance. Our sexual health and wellness clinics, all of our staff are getting trained on working with LGBTQ young people. Our mental hygiene department, we also have, you know, we're working with different LGBTQ organizations to make sure that everything we're doing supports LGBTQ families and young people too.
I was recently at a Passover Seder in which the host is a public school teacher in Brooklyn, and after she did get more knowledge about gender identity, she took a kid from another class who comes from a Christian Caribbean household but knows that the individual identifies as gender variant, and she allows them to spend some time during the day to put on makeup. You know that they don't have a time like otherwise. And I just thought that was so beautiful of like that person and you know, having that space, and the teacher makes sure that everyone calls them by their preferred pronouns and let everyone know that makeup's for everyone and it's fun and it shouldn't just be one gendered.
If I may share
Sure.
one of my experiences, I became very close with my English teacher as a freshman, and we're still very close now. And she was the first person who I ever asked to call my preferred name. And so we have still a very close relationship. And I remember one day I was having a total crisis because I feel masculine a lot of the time. And I'm so short. I'm 5'1", and that's not something that people attribute masculinity to. And I came to her in tears in like a breakdown, like I'm too short and I'm not skinny enough and no one will ever see me that way. And to have someone at school who wasn't like my relative or some professional that I had to go to tell me like it's okay, and just because X doesn't mean Y, and you aren't invalidated and that you're safe here. That's so important to have someone like that in your schools for teens who are struggling.
And in lines with that, how do you feel people could be an ally to gender nonconforming and trans people, especially students?
I think it's important to maybe mentally put yourself in their shoes, but not to compare oneself, to say that you're there to help them, but to not try and say, to ultimately like force options, like not to try and force someone to come out because, oh, it would work with my parents, because like you have to understand that everyone's situation is different.
Yeah. And I would also say, pronouns are incredibly important.
Yes.
Making sure that you use people's pronouns and their names, and make sure that you use your own pronouns. I've always found it helpful that when I'm meeting a person for the first time, if I introduce my pronouns, they're more comfortable introducing their pronouns. And I would just say to adults who are working with or who are in the lives of LGBTQ youth, just, accept them for who they are. Just whatever they tell you, even if they use different pronouns on another day, that's who they are, and just accept it every day.
I want to thank you so much, Larry and Maxx, for coming onto our show today. This is our first episode, so you're a very special guest, and you always will be. And I can't forget to thank you, the viewers, for being open to learn. In a perfect world, we can all uplift each other and allow our gender expressions and identity not to get in the way. There's still so much to tackle when it comes to gender, so this is the first, but not the last time you'll see me. So keep a lookout for more episodes of Gender Benderz here on Manhattan Neighborhood Network Youth Channel. In the meantime, follow me on social media at mx.enigma and shoot me any thoughts, questions, or suggestions. Continue to be you. Goodbye.